In this series, we're gonna be talking about SQL injections. SQL injections are vulnerabilities that can be found in web applications. But before we explain how to discover them and exploit them and what SQL is, let's just zoom out very quickly and remember what a website is. So a website is basically just a web application installed on a server. And a server is simply just a computer. So right now we have this computer. It could be any computer. It could be your personal computer. And when we say it's a server, it just has certain applications on it that allow it to act as a server. Now, generally, servers on the internet are accessible from any computer on the internet. So they're hosted on the cloud, as they call them now. And basically it has a real IP, and then anybody connected to the internet is able to communicate with this computer. Because this computer has a specific application that allow it to act as a server, we call it a server. But if you strip everything down, it's basically just a computer with special programs installed on it. Then we make that computer accessible over the cloud, over the internet, which makes it very appropriate to use as a web server or a server that can be accessed from other computers or other locations. A very common application that could make it act as a server is a web server. What is a web server? It's basically an application that you can install on any computer. So the computer doesn't even have to be exposed to the internet. You can install it on your own local computer, even if it's not connected to the internet. It's just an application. And what that application does, it specifies a certain location within your file system. And in that location, you can host files. So anybody connected to the same network as you, or if this computer is exposed to the internet, then anybody that is on the internet will be able to access the files stored within the web root, or the file that the web server uses to serve files to the users. Web servers usually also contain the web application files. So a web application is similar to any application. The only difference is it's designed to run on a web server and designed to be served over the internet to another computer. So the web server can execute web application languages similar to PHP, Python, and Ruby. So you would have the web application files stored within the web server, because like I said, the initial goal of the web server is to be able to serve files to remote computers using a web browser using the HTTP protocol. The web application files contain code. So the website files could be images, they could be normal HTML files, so they don't really contain code, but the web application files, they actually contain code written in a programming language that can process information and manipulate it and do useful tasks. So it would be written in languages like PHP, Python, Ruby, and so on. And most websites that actually do something useful, other than websites that just simply display information, like a shop website, they would actually be written in a programming language such as these. Now, another very common component of a website is the database. So the web server contains the files like images, styling files, HTML files. These are all just used to display the website, to render the website. And then you have the web application files, which is the ones run on the server side to process data. But the data is usually stored in a different application, which is called a database. Now, the database contains a number of tables, and we have in here a sample of a table. We're assuming that this table contains products that are being sold on a shop website. So you can see we have the ID of the products, we have the title, so this is an iPhone, an iPad, a mouse, and the price, we have the price in here for each of these products. So the web server contains the HTML pages, the beautiful pages that you actually see, the ones with it contains the images, so the images for the iPhones, the iPads, the mouses that this website is selling. It also contains a web application that interacts with the database to display all of these products. So the web application itself doesn't contain the products, the product information is stored in the database. Now, the database contains a number of tables. This is just one example of a table. It'll contain tables, for example, for the users, and it'll contain the usernames and the passwords. And then users, when they log in, the web application would communicate with the database to check if the user that you're trying to log in with exists in the database, and checks if the username you supplied is the same one as the password. So it's very important to understand the role of the database. web application stored on the web server. It just communicates with the database, gets information, and then displays it or does something useful with it. But the data itself is not stored on the web server. It's not stored within the web application. It's actually stored on the database. The web application communicates with the database using a markup language called SQL. So whenever you load the products page, for example, in a shop website, for example, at Z Security, if you go to the shop page, it's going to communicate with our database and it's going to retrieve all of the products that we have on our store. And it does that using a language called SQL. If the web application itself is vulnerable, as a hacker, you're going to be able to inject your own SQL statements and retrieve data from the database that you're not supposed to see. So you're supposed to see the products, that's fine because the shop website shows it to you, but you're not supposed to see the data in the users table, for example, because that will expose the users, their emails, their phone numbers, and possibly their passwords. But if you're able to inject your own SQL queries, you'll be able to manipulate this web application and communicate with the database and access the users table, possibly read the admin, and log into the website as the administrator. And then you'll be able to do whatever that the admin can do on the website. But anyway, usually when you're at that stage, when you're able to inject whatever SQL statement you want, you don't even need to log in as admin in many cases because you already have access to the database, and the database usually contains all the information you need. It contains all the users, it contains all of their data, and it contains all of the data that is stored on that website. Whatever you need from that website, it's usually stored in the database. It's not really stored in the web server. And even if it is stored on the web server, you'll be able to log in as admin and then access the web server and the files on it. In many cases, you'll be able to execute code. You'll be able to upload your own files and again, upload the shell and gain access. You can do so much with SQL injections, and we'll see that as we go through the series.